Welcome to another deep dive. Are you ready to go back in time with us and explore the life of Walther Gerlach?
Sounds fascinating.
He's this German physicist who played a huge role in shaping our understanding of quantum mechanics.
Oh, quantum mechanics. Always a brain twister.
We've got some excerpts from his biography ready to go. We're going to unpack some really interesting details about his life and his work,
I'm all ears.
especially this experiment called the Stern-Gerlach Experiment.
Ah, yes, that's a big one in the world of quantum mechanics. What I find really interesting about Gerlach is how his story is so closely connected to some of the biggest scientific discoveries of the 20th century.
It's like he was right there in the middle of it all, not just observing from the sidelines.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with the basics.
Let's.
Gerlach was born on August 1st, 1889,
Okay.
in Biebrich, Germany,
All right.
to Dr. Valentin Gerlach and Marie Niederhauser.
Got it. So early life, where did his journey into science begin?
Well, even his education kind of hints at a future in science. He started studying at the University of Tübingen in 1908.
Tübingen, nice.
And get this, just 4 years later, he earned his doctorate in 1912
Wow, that's impressive.
under the mentorship of Friedrich Paschen.
Wait a minute, wasn't Paschen like a giant in the field of spectroscopy? I'm sensing a theme here. Gerlach seems to always be surrounded by these leading figures in science.
Right, it's like he was meant to learn from the very best.
So what was his dissertation about?
Radiation measurement.
Radiation measurement. That's pretty advanced for a brand new doctorate.
Yeah. And, this focus on precise measurement, it became a hallmark of his entire career.
I can see how that would be essential, especially for something as intricate as the Stern-Gerlach experiment, which we'll talk about later.
For sure. But before we jump ahead, we need to address the elephant in the room, World War I. It kind of interrupted his academic pursuits from 1915 to 1918.
I guess even scientific minds get called to duty. What did he do during the war?
He focused on wireless telegraphy under Max Wien in Jena.
Wien, another big name in physics.
I know. And later, he served in the Artillery Proofings Commission under, wait for it, Rudolf Ladenburg.
Wow, so he was rubbing shoulders with some serious scientific minds even during the war? I bet this was a really formative period for him.
Oh, definitely. This wartime work exposed him to all this cutting-edge technology.
I see.
And he got to collaborate with these brilliant scientists from different fields.
So the war, in a way, broadened his scientific horizons.
Exactly. So after the war ended in 1916, he became a private dozent at the University of Tübingen.
Okay.
And a year later, he got the same position at the University of Göttingen.
Private doesn't. That's like a pretty prestigious position, right? It means he was qualified to teach at the university level.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But here's the interesting thing. He didn't just stay in that traditional academic world.
Oh.
From 1919 to 1920, he headed a physics lab at Farbenfabriken Elberfeld, which would later become part of Bayer. That's the big pharmaceutical company.
Interesting. So he had experience both in academia and industry.
Right. And then, in 1921, he moved to the Goethe University Frankfurt as an extraordinary professor.
Frankfurt. And that's where it all happened, the Stern-Gerlach experiment.
This is where it gets super fascinating. Now, I have heard of the Stern-Gerlach experiment.
It's a fundamental one.
I know it's considered one of the cornerstones of quantum mechanics.
Absolutely. It was a game changer.
But to be totally honest, the science behind it is still a bit fuzzy to me. Can you break it down for us? What were they even trying to prove with this experiment?
Well, the experiment was actually Otto Stern's idea, and he came up with it in 1921. The goal was to investigate this really fundamental question in quantum mechanics.
Hey, lay it on me.
Is the angular momentum of an atom quantized?
Okay, quantize. What does that even mean?
It means it can only exist in specific discrete values, not just any value on a continuous spectrum. Think of it like a staircase versus a ramp.
Okay.
You can only stand on specific steps of the staircase. But on a ramp, you can be anywhere. They wanted to find out if angular momentum was like a staircase or like a ramp.
So how did they test that?
They decided to use silver atoms and a magnetic field to see what would happen.
Okay, and where does Gerlach fit into all of this?
That's where his incredible precision comes in. This experiment required like insane levels of accuracy.
Really?
To detect these tiny deflections of the silver atoms as they went through the magnetic field. Imagine like trying to measure the width of a human hair from across the room with a ruler. It was a technical challenge unlike any other.
Gerlach was up for that challenge.
He was the man for the job. And the results of the experiment Wow, they were really mind-blowing.
Tell me.
The silver atoms didn't just deflect randomly, as you might expect.
Yeah.
They actually split into two distinct beams.
What's...
Yeah. And this splitting provided direct evidence that the angular momentum or spin of the atoms was, in fact, quantized.
Hold on. So they proved that angular momentum is like a staircase, not a ramp.
You got it. The Stern-Gerlach experiment provided one of the first concrete confirmations of this key principle of quantum mechanics. It really shook things up in the field and helped solidify the foundation of this emerging science.
I bet. And it wouldn't have been possible without Gerlach and his meticulous approach.
Absolutely. His precision was crucial to the experiment's success. You know, there's this great anecdote involving Wolfgang Pauli,
Oh, tell me.
another big name in quantum physics. He actually sent Gerlach a postcard to congratulate him on the success of the experiment.
No way. That's awesome. What did it say?
Well, what makes it even better is that Pauli mentioned that he doubted Stern himself would have believed in the experiment's potential beforehand.
Oh, that's funny.
It just goes to show the level of skepticism and excitement surrounding these early days of quantum mechanics.
Even brilliant minds like Pauli had their doubts. It's amazing to think that Gerlach pulled off this incredible feat of experimental physics, confirmed a core principle of quantum mechanics.
Yep.
And even impressed a skeptic like Pauli. What happened next?
Well, his success didn't stop there. In 1925, he became a full professor at the University of Tübingen.
Wow, full circle moment. He took over the position previously held by his mentor, Friedrich Paschen.
Exactly.
That's incredible. But I'm guessing his journey didn't end there.
You're right. In 1929, he moved to the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich,
Munich.
succeeding another legend, Wilhelm Wien.
It's incredible how he succeeded both Paschen and Wien. It just shows how central he became to the world of German physics. It also makes me think about his role during World War II, when he became a leader in the Nazi regime's scientific efforts.
It is a complicated chapter.
It is. It's something we definitely need to discuss.
Yeah.
But for now, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll delve into that complex and controversial part of Gerlach's story.
So before the break, we were talking about Gerlach becoming such a key figure in German physics.
Yeah.
Right before World War II.
Right.
It kind of makes you wonder about what he was up to during the war itself. It really is a complex part of his story. I mean, on one hand, he's this brilliant physicist, but then on the other hand, he was operating within the Nazi regime. It's definitely something we can't just ignore. So what exactly was Gerlach doing during the war years?
Well, his involvement really deepened in 1944,
Okay.
when he took on this role, headed the physics section of the Reichsforschungsrat.
The Reich Research Council.
Yeah.
So what did that involve?
Basically, he was responsible for coordinating physics research for the entire war effort. So this put him right at the heart of Nazi Germany's scientific endeavors, which, obviously raises a lot of questions about his complicity.
He was essentially the top physics guy in Nazi Germany. That must have been an immense amount of pressure.
Yeah, definitely. And the stakes were really high. Like, remember, this was a time when the race for nuclear weapons was intensifying globally. So the decisions made by scientists like Gerlach had the potential to actually alter the course of history.
You're kidding. So was he directly involved in the nuclear program?
That's the big question, right? It's a
Yeah.
million-dollar question. The historical record is kind of fragmented,
Okay.
and historians still debate the extent of his involvement in weapons research. Some argue that his role as plenipotentiary of nuclear physics suggests a deep involvement in the program.
Plenipotentiary of nuclear physics. What does that even mean?
It essentially meant that he was the top authority on all things nuclear research in Germany at that time.
Wow, that's huge.
It was a huge responsibility, with immense implications. So he's at the helm of German nuclear research during this really sensitive period in history. What do we know about his actions and motivations during this time?
Well, in May 1945, Gerlach was arrested by Allied forces
Okay.
as part of Operation Alsos.
Operation Alsos, what was that all about?
It was this mission to capture German scientists
Okay.
and gather intel about their nuclear program.
So basically, they were trying to figure out if the Nazis were close to developing an atomic bomb.
Exactly. They wanted to make sure they stayed ahead in the arms race.
I can only imagine the tension at that time.
Absolutely.
So where does Gerlach fit into all of this?
He was one of 10 German scientists taken to Farm Hall in England.
Farm Hall.
Yeah, as part of Operation Epsilon.
Okay.
And here's the interesting thing. Their conversations were secretly recorded.
Wait, they were spying on them?
They were.
What did they find out?
Well, these transcripts are super fascinating.
Mm.
They offer this like window into the minds of these scientists. They talk about the war, about their research, their reactions to the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's like a real-life scientific thriller.
I bet those conversations were pretty intense.
Mm.
Do those recordings tell us anything about Gerlach's role in the nuclear program?
Well, it's not totally clear-cut. Some historians believe that these recordings prove he was really active in weapons research,
Okay.
but others argue that he was more focused on peaceful applications of nuclear energy
Interesting.
and maybe even critical of the regime's pursuit of atomic weapons. So there's still this ongoing debate. We're dealing with incomplete information. What's clear is that Gerlach's expertise was very valuable.
Yeah, even in the middle of a war.
Mm.
So the debate about his exact involvement in the nuclear program continues. But what happened to him after the war ended?
Despite all the controversies, surrounding his wartime activities, his scientific standing remained strong.
Okay.
He actually became a visiting professor at the University of Bonn in 1946.
Okay.
And then just 2 years later, he got an even bigger role. He was appointed a full professor
Wow.
and director of the physics department at the University of Munich. He basically reclaimed his pre-war position.
So it's almost like the war didn't even happen.
Right. At least in terms of his academic career, it really shows how much they valued scientific knowledge even after such a huge global conflict. His expertise was too valuable to just ignore all the political stuff. It also shows how resilient Gerlach was.
Right, he was dedicated to science.
Totally. And his influence extended beyond academia in the post-war years, too.
Oh, tell me more.
In 1949, he became the founding president of the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft.
Well, okay.
It's an organization that focuses on promoting applied research.
So not just the theory, but also how to put that scientific knowledge to practical use.
Exactly. And that's not all. He also took on this major leadership role in the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, or DFG. It's a big research funding organization in Germany.
So he was leading research, promoting practical applications, and overseeing funding. It sounds like he was really shaping the future of German science. What does this tell us about his overall vision for science?
It's pretty clear that Gerlach was a huge advocate for science in all its forms.
Yeah.
He really believed in collaboration, encouraging those practical applications, making sure there were enough resources for research.
All while a nation was trying to rebuild itself after a devastating war.
Exactly. And, his leadership during this really critical time helped bring German science back to the global stage. But Gerlach's vision wasn't limited to just advancing science. He was also really concerned about the ethical side of things, the implications of scientific discoveries.
After all his wartime experiences, that's understandable.
Yeah. In 1957, he actually co-signed the Göttingen Manifesto. It was this document that opposed the nuclear armament of West Germany.
So he was willing to take a stand against the very technology he had been involved with during the war.
He was. He really understood the destructive potential of scientific advancements, especially after seeing the horrors of World War II firsthand. This really demonstrates his moral compass, and his understanding of the responsibility that comes with scientific knowledge.
It's interesting, right? He's the scientist who was wrestling with the ethical implications of his work, especially given the backdrop of such a devastating conflict.
It really is fascinating.
It's amazing how his story is so intertwined with all the complexities of the 20th century. It makes you think about the role of scientists during times of war and peace, doesn't it?
For sure. Gerlach's story really reminds us that science isn't done in isolation.
Right.
It's influenced by all the social and political forces around it. Scientists are just like everyone else.
Right.
They face tough choices, especially during conflict. His life shows us how powerful scientific inquiry can be.
Yeah.
But it also reminds us of the ethical dilemmas that can come up. It's a legacy full of great accomplishments, but also these tough questions.
Before we move on to the last part of Gerlach's life,
Yeah.
let's just take a moment to really appreciate all that he achieved.
Okay.
He wasn't just a brilliant experimental physicist.
Right.
He was also a leader, someone who advocated for science, and someone who really grappled with those ethical implications of his work.
His story really makes us think about those complexities of scientific progress and the responsibilities that come with it.
We've learned so much about Walther Gerlach.
He really lived quite a life.
From his groundbreaking experiments to those controversial wartime activities and his dedication to rebuilding German science.
It's amazing how much he accomplished.
It makes you wonder, what did he do in those later years of his career? Did he just, retire quietly?
Not quite. Even as he got older, Gerlach kept getting recognized for all his contributions to science. He became a member of not one, not two, but three prestigious academies of sciences.
3. Wow. Which ones?
Göttingen, Halle, and Munich.
That's incredible. It really shows the level of respect he had within the scientific community.
They recognized his brilliance, as a physicist, but also his leadership and his dedication to pushing science forward.
He wasn't just some solitary genius working alone in a lab.
Definitely not. He was actively shaping the scientific landscape. And the accolades didn't stop there.
Really? There's more?
Oh, yeah. He was awarded the civil class of the Pour le Mérite. It's a very prestigious German Order of Merit, kind of like their version of the Nobel Prize.
Wow. The Nobel-level recognition.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what about later on?
Well, in 1970, he received the Bundesverdienstkreuz mit Stern.
Say that 5 times fast.
I know, right? It's a mouthful.
What is that exactly?
It's the Order of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany. They gave it to him for all his work rebuilding German science after the war and for his commitment to fostering international scientific cooperation.
So it sounds like he was instrumental in bringing German science back onto the world stage.
He really was.
After a period of, turmoil and isolation.
It must have been pretty rewarding to receive that recognition.
I can imagine. All these honors really show the lasting impact of his work.
Yeah.
He wasn't just a pioneer in physics, he was a builder, a leader.
Yeah.
Who really dedicated himself to shaping the future of German science.
And shaping its place in the world.
It's incredible how he accomplished so much.
I know, right?
Despite all the challenges and controversies he faced, it makes you realize the pursuit of knowledge. It can persevere, even in the face of adversity. Science can go beyond political boundaries and historical upheaval.
It's a powerful force.
So after such a long and impactful career, when did Gerlach finally retire?
Sadly, Walther Gerlach passed away on August 10th, 1979, just a few days after his 90th birthday.
Wow, 90 years old. It marks the end of an era, really?
Definitely.
The closing of a chapter in the history of physics filled with groundbreaking discoveries and wartime complexities, and of course, a dedication to scientific progress. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Gerlach's life, it's clear that his legacy is multifaceted. On one hand, we have the brilliance of the Stern-Gerlach experiment, a cornerstone of quantum mechanics, and on the other, there's the shadow of his wartime activities. That debate about his role in the Nazi regime's scientific endeavors continues to this day.
It's crucial to acknowledge both the triumphs and the complexities. He was a man of his time, living through such a turbulent period in history. His actions, especially during the war, continue to be debated.
His story really highlights how the history of science is often intertwined with the complexities of human history. Scientists, they're not immune to the political and social forces that shape our world.
They're human, just like everyone else.
Exactly. But even with those complexities, we can't deny the impact Gerlach had on our understanding of the quantum world.
The Stern-Gerlach experiment changed everything. It revolutionized our understanding of how atoms behave and opened up doors for countless advancements in physics, in technology, you name it.
And that impact continues to this day.
It does.
Gerlach wasn't just a brilliant physicist. He was a leader, an advocate for science, and someone who really grappled with the ethical side of his work. His story reminds us that scientific progress is powerful, but it comes with responsibilities.
Absolutely. We need to be aware of the potential consequences and ethical dilemmas that scientific advancements can bring.
It's a conversation that's still relevant today, right?
Right.
As we try to understand new technologies and how science will shape our future, Gerlach's life and work offer valuable lessons about the responsibilities that come with scientific progress. It encourages us to be enthusiastic about science, but also to remain critical.
We need to be mindful of the potential consequences.
It's been a fascinating journey exploring the life and work of Walther Gerlach. His story reminds us that science is a human endeavor with its brilliance and its flaws and a constant pursuit of knowledge. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. I encourage you to keep exploring the world of science and the people who shaped it. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.